Morning. Welcome. Thank you for coming. I'm Chris Stecker. I'm the horticulture technician, master gardener program coordinator here in Alamance County. And today we're going to talk about what to do in the garden to get ready for winter because it's time. Time to prepare. Winter is coming. So there's no time to waste. We got to get busy. Okay, so the average date of first frost, write this down. Well, it's already on your sheet. October 15th. Now that's the average date. We're not saying that we can't have frost before then. Lately it's been well after that, but that is an important date and you'll need to remember that during this presentation. So let's start with houseplants. We're basically going to cover all of the bases, any kind of things that are outside, and what to do in preparation for winter. So you're going to move your houseplants back inside when nighttime temperatures dip below 50 degrees. It could be this weekend. Could be this weekend. Now they probably won't get killed if it gets down in the 40s, but if it hits 32, they're going to be very sad. So do bring them inside. Now, when you bring them inside, they've been outdoors. Even if they've been outdoors in the shade, that's still more light than they've been getting, than they will get inside your home. So if you have a sun porch or you have a greenhouse, that would be great. Otherwise, you're going to have to put them in the brightest location you can. Hello. Check for hitchhikers. A lot of times there'll be some insects that have taken up residence on there. It might be aphids, could be fungus gnats, could be who knows what on the plants. If you find any, insecticidal soap will work well. Do spray while they're still outdoors rather than spraying inside your house. You really don't want to do that. You might want to tip the plant out of the pot and see if maybe there's, I don't know, a snake in the pot. Then you don't want to bring that in. Slugs could be in there. There could be all kinds of things. Next year, before you put your plants outside, tip them out and put a piece of screening at the bottom of the pot, and that will keep those critters from coming inside the pot. So that's a note I didn't write on there. You might want to write that on your handout. So then you won't have to worry about snakes or slugs in the bottom of the pot. Reduce your watering. When the plants come inside, they do not need as much water, and don't fertilize them because you don't want them to encourage them to try to put on more growth, and you could burn them because they're going to take a nap now. So you want to not encourage them to put on a lot of growth, especially if they're in a dark situation. You might need to cut them back a little bit so that they don't have so much top growth, but don't worry too much about pruning them. Some may lose leaves, don't panic. It's just an adjustment to the light level. Some plants, such as mandevillas, hibiscus, things like that, you may need to just put them in an unheated garage or under your house if they're in a pot and someplace where they are not going to, the soil won't get frozen. These are plants that are almost hardy here, and they'll die off on the top, and you can basically ignore them all winter without watering them or doing anything to them. If you put them in a place with light, they might keep leaves on, and you might need to water them just a little bit, but don't worry about them too much.
What do you mean by a little bit?
Don't water them at all.
At all?
For you, don't water them at all. If there's still green on the plant and it's in a lighted place, you might want to add water maybe once a month. So just you have to play it by ear. But remember, none of these are hard and fast rules, and you could have casualties, and that is a shopping opportunity. Just keep that in mind. Soil test. This is a good time to do a soil test. Soil Lab offers free soil testing until Thanksgiving, and then there will be a $4 per sample charge between Thanksgiving and April 1st. So do it now, it's free. If you bring it here, there's still time for us to take it in, and we can do that for you. If your soil test calls for lime, fall's a really good time to put lime down because the freeze and thaw will help move it through the soil a little bit, so you don't have to worry so much about tilling it in. The soil test will tell you how much lime you need to apply, and that's basically based on a couple of things, including pH. So that if the pH is too low, they'll recommend an application of lime. Also, this time of year, you can add phosphorus and potassium if the soil test determines that these are deficient. So they will also make a recommendation for what type of fertilizer that you can use. Nitrogen fertilization is not recommended for any plants at this time except for cool season lawns. Nitrogen will encourage top growth, and you really don't want any plants to put on a lot of top growth now because winter is coming, as I said previously. Okay, leaves. The leaves are on the ground. What are you going to do? You can leave them there. I think that's great. That's nature's own mulch. They're under the trees. You don't have to worry so much about weeds. They keep that down. If you have lawn areas, that could be a problem because the leaves can smother the grass and you'll have dead areas in the grass from that. A rake is great on established lawns. You might want a low-powered blower for newly seeded lawns so you don't blow away the new grass. Those are the battery-powered blowers. They're relatively inexpensive. They don't have a lot of power. They only last about 10 minutes, but you can recharge them. So, I mean, they're very handy for this type of application. And I think even the big blowers might have an adjustable speed, although most of them are kind of like gale force winds, so a little bit much for those newly seeded areas. Collect the leaves that you take off the lawn. You can spread them as they are on fallow vegetable beds in natural areas. You can use them as the brown in your compost pile. Now, we're not going to go into composting deeply here, but because we have a lot of these points here are covered in many of our other classes, but with compost you want to have some brown and some green mixed together, and the brown and leaves are the best brown. And you can grind them up if they aren't going to decompose fast enough for you. In your blender? I'd probably use a dedicated blender for that. Just like your coffee, you've got your coffee grinder and your herb grinder. You don't really want to mix those either. So, and as far as like sterilizing soil in the oven, you might want to have some dedicated pans for that. Just for creepiness sake. All right, vegetables. Okay, so here we go. Before first frost, harvest your sweet potatoes. They will rot if they get frozen. Harvest your tomatoes. Wrap green tomatoes individually in newspaper to ripen and check them every week. That usually works pretty well if you leave them on your counter in the kitchen too. Or cover them with cornmeal and fry them. Good suggestion. You can make relish with them too. I've seen some recipes for that. So the green tomatoes have a lot of useful purposes. I've had a green tomato BLT with the fried green tomatoes and bacon. It is. It's a good thing. It's a good thing. Okay, now actually you want to plant your garlic and onion bulbs. Right here at the Extension office, we plant our garlic the first week in November, and we harvest it the first week in June. Now there's all kinds of theories about that, as the different dates. That's what works for us here at the Extension office. However, you can plant them as early as now. And you really want the soil temperatures to be not quite so high as they are right now. So I would say soil temperatures below 60 degrees is probably best for planting garlic. Plant a cover crop in unused garden spaces. Now this is something that we really don't cover much in our other classes. And I do have for everybody a sample of a cover crop. This is a combination of Ecotil radish, crimson clover, and ryegrain. And this will improve your garden soil. Well, here we go. Let's talk about it. Improves soil texture because the roots break up the soil. It fixes nitrogen. The crimson clover will fix nitrogen, which means that it actually will capture nitrogen from the atmosphere, which is, our atmosphere is mostly nitrogen, and then we'll have that available in the soil. Reduce soil compaction. Again, this is the Ecotil radish, which, by the way, is a daikon radish. And if you harvest this before frost, it's delicious. But what it will do is it will grow a very long root. Brad harvested this morning. Brad and Soil and Water. His card is on your free sample too. They're doing a lot of work with cover crops, and as a matter of fact, they're putting in some cover crop test plots over on the other side of our big parking lot in front. So this was planted 45 days ago. This radish. So this is going to grow down, grows a very deep taproot, and then in the spring, or then over winter, it will freeze and rot and will leave openings in the soil rather than, and you won't have to deal with getting rid of biomass, which is what all of this is called. So this is a really good cover crop and delicious. Okay. We can and also the radishes and the cereal rye, which is in there, recapture nutrients, other nutrients, and we'll put them back in the soil. So potassium and phosphorus will be recaptured and put back into the soil. So these cover crops are better than just putting leaves over the top of your soil. Also control weeds, because again, you've got a thick crop of plants that you want, and you won't have so much so much chickweed in there. I know the bees like the chickweed. So, and they prevent erosion. Yes?
How much acreage do your seeds?
Well, it's fun. This packet, this is a ½ pound. It will cover 500 square feet. So it's 45 to 50 pounds per acre is the recommended amount of this blend. And then, so everybody can take home one of these and do their vegetable garden this afternoon. Yes?
What do you do in the spring then with the ryegrass, and how do you till that up?
Probably for a small garden, you're going to want to mow it or cut it down and till in what's left of the roots, and then you can use what you've cut back as mulch, the chops as mulch. That's what Brad recommended. So this is a great thing, cover crops. And now's the time to plant. Okay, perennials. What do you do with your perennials? Remove the dead foliage, especially if you've got plants like peonies that have a lot of dead leaves and so forth. But leave the seed pods or seed heads for wildlife. It's not the law. If you can't stand it, you can take the seed heads off. So we have some questionable seed heads in our pollinator garden now. So whether they're gorgeous or unattractive. Do not cut back hollow-stemmed perennials, including lantana and salvias. Wait until winter's end for these, which would be March. And that is because the plants with the hollow stems collect water, rainwater. If you cut them back, there's now an opening. The water gets in there and can freeze and kill the root. So this is plants like this Salvia guaranitica that we have in the garden here, black and blue salvia, is what they call a marginally hardy salvia, which means that it's a little tender here. So that one you'd probably leave the top on and not cut it all the way back. And the same with lantana. It's another one that's marginally hardy. So plants with hollow stems, and that's how you cut one, and you can see, oh, it's got a hollow stem. Then don't cut them back until spring or until the end of winter. Okay, now is the best time to divide and transplant perennials. And I have a few perennials here for your tickets. You plant divisions and new plants the same depth as they were growing. So I have here some plants to talk about that are fall bloomers. This is white wood aster, which is Eurybia diverticata. Anyway, this one's blooming in the garden right now. It's kind of like a sprawling ground cover, and it grows well in dry shade, which is what we have in abundance, and it gets these little white flowers. Actually, the one's blooming in the garden now. It's got little white flowers all over it, so there's that. This is not the most gorgeous sample, but this is blooming right now in the garden right outside that you can see it from the door. This is Conoclinum, hardy ageratum is the common name, blue mist flower, Conoclinium colestinium, which they changed the name just to make it hard. So, but anyway, hardy ageratum has beautiful blue flowers, and it's blooming in the garden now. In the fall again, and this one's also blooming now. This is swamp sunflower, Helianthus angustifolius. Yes, angustifolius, and this one's blooming in the garden now too. It has pretty yellow daisy flowers, and it gets to be quite not super tall, maybe that tall, and then it leans. We've got another one in the rain garden that's just about to bloom. So these are actually from the garden here. And this one does not bloom this time of year. However, it gets beautiful golden yellow fall foliage. This is Amsonia tabermonte, which is eastern blue star, and it becomes a nice clump about 2.5, 3 feet tall by about as wide. So these are what your raffle tickets are for. We're going to do this at the end. So those are some ideas for plants that you can plant now. Of course, any perennials you can plant now. And as long as you plant the divisions and the new plants the same depth as they were growing, so that means when you plant, this plant is about here in the pot, so when you plant it in the ground, you're going to plant it at that depth or maybe a little bit higher because they'll settle. And most of them like good drainage.
Chris,
Yes,
talking about peonies,
yes.
the foliage is brown, but the stalks are still green. Would I just cut the foliage off and not leave the stalks alone?
No, you can cut the stalks off now.
So Chris, is it a good time to divide daylilies?
Yes,
What about hostas?
hosta's fine. Pretty much any perennial. This is a good time to do it. They have 2 seasons to grow roots because the roots are going to continue to grow, and this goes for trees and shrubs as well. The roots are going to continue to grow as long as the soil temperature is above 50 degrees or something like that. So they'll have 2 seasons basically before it gets hot, and they stop growing in order to grow roots and grow big. So this is the really ideal time to be planting.
What about watering, if it stays hot like this for a couple of weeks?
Well, as soon as you plant, anytime you put new plants in the ground, you're going to want to keep them watered. So it depends on the weather, how often you have to water them. If it's hot and sunny like it is now, you're definitely going to want to keep track of that.
Do I remember that you said water the plant thoroughly before you divide it?
Yes,
Or-
absolutely, great idea. If you're going to divide plants from the garden, go the day before and make sure that they're very well hydrated. So when you dig them up, this dry soil doesn't just fall off, and the plant is in good shape before you try to dig it up, especially since it hasn't rained here for several weeks. So if you want to dig up plants, you're going to want to water them very well the day before, or at least the day before, maybe a couple days before. Bulbs. It's bulb season. All right, tender bulbs, dahlias, caladiums, elephant ears. You might want to dig them up because they are not reliably hardy here. And then you're going to shake the soil off and store them in a cool, dry place, and then you replant them in the spring. Like we do, leave the dahlias and elephant ears in the ground over winter if you're willing to take a chance. Now, if it's your prized dinner plate dahlia that you paid $50 for, you might consider digging it up and bringing it in, because there's no guarantee. But we've had one in the garden for several serious cold winters, and it's come back every year. So it's up to you. I'm not going to recommend that you leave them in the garden. And elephant ears, same thing. I've never heard of anybody's caladiums coming back, so you might want to make sure you bring those in, or shop next year. Plant spring flowering bulbs now. If you have a problem with voles, members of the Narcissus genus are your best bet. They are unattractive to voles and other wildlife that might want to eat things in your garden. So if you don't want to worry about munching by deer or rabbits or voles, go ahead and plant Narcissus, which are all the daffodils and jonquils and those. If you must have tulips, plant them in hardware cloth cages or berry boxes, and not the paper berry boxes, but the plastic ones that have they're like a cage. So here's or you can try, and I've heard this, I've not tried it, interplanting tulips and hyacinths with the Narcissus, so to confuse the little smoke and mirrors for your wildlife. And there's a picture of the hardware cloth cage. It's a little complicated, but it should work. The roots go down and the plants come up through the cage, and voles can't get in there. So probably you would leave the top open to fill it up with soil to make sure it got full. You do still want good contact with soil, yes.
I've been looking all over the place for peony bulbs, and I've not been able to find them, but I know that you're supposed to plant them now in the fall.
Mm-hmm.
But I checked all the big box stores and garden centers, and they say, well, we only get those in the spring. We get the plants and the bulbs in the spring. So what do I do besides find a friend and get some?
Order from Brex or
There are some,
not Brex.
I have them at home. It's
Brent
just-
and Becky's.
Brent and Becky, but I have, if you give me your email
Okay.
before you leave, I'll go through my catalogs. I have one that's all peonies.
Okay.
You can,
But Brent and Becky's, which is in Virginia, they will send you the bulbs at the proper time to plant.
Yeah, but
So.
she's going to give me some first.
Oh. Oh, well, there you go. Perfect.
I know, but I was just wondering, since you're supposed to plant them in the fall, why don't
Because
they have all these, like the narcissus and tulips and all those, but not peonies,
because they're more expensive,
Really?
and because people don't think about planting them in the fall. They see them in the spring, and they're like, then they want them. So it's marketing. It's all marketing. They don't mind putting the daffodil bulbs on their sale table, but it hurts to put the peonies on the sale table, I guess. Okay, your lawn. So if you have a warm season lawn, zoysia, centipede, just ignore this part, because you're not going to do anything to that lawn right now. This is the time of year for repair and improvement of your cool season lawn, fescue or bluegrass. Or fescue, we don't usually grow bluegrass standalone, but it's sometimes in a mix. Or a blend. Mix? Okay. Aerate and overseed thin areas. Fertilize according to a soil test. And the rule of thumb for cool season lawn fertilization schedule is Labor Day, Halloween, and Valentine's Day. That's ish. Do not fertilize your warm season lawns now, your Bermuda grass, your centipede, or your zoysia. Yes?
Okay, I have a yard that has not been, the lawn has not been kept up, and so it's full of crabgrass and weeds and all those things. And I know that I probably should have killed everything in August, but I didn't do that. So what should I do to it at this point? Because there's no need of having it just aerated, because there's not enough space, you know, do you remember Rick Davis is calling me, said, send him a check, you know, it'll do us much good if you try to aerate and plant grass if you got a lot of weeds and crabgrass and all that. So what should I do, because I was thinking about having the lawn man actually fertilize in October and December like you would fescue, and there's a little bit of fescue in there, but I don't know, you know, since you're saying don't fertilize, you know, warm season grasses now, what can I do to it?
Kill it.
Wait till next fall. You have a suggestion, Mark?
Do you have trees? A lot of trees?
No, I don't. I have a sunny yard.
I'd go ahead and overseed it. Fescue. Mow it real close
Yeah.
and go ahead and overseed it this fall.
Yeah. I've been spraying for weeds, you know, those, the sprayers you can hook onto your hose, and so I'm getting rid of a lot of the little black clover, which I don't know
Well,
what
if
the
you,
name of it is.
for our listeners, I don't know if you heard that or not, but Mark recommends that you go ahead and aerate and overseed. Cut the lawn very short first, scalp it, do what the unthinkable with your fescue lawn, and that's cut it at a real low setting on your mower. That'll get rid of some of the weeds, and then aerate, and then overseed. Yes, but
Look at the label on whatever you're using for weed control. Some of the 2,4-D products will have a waiting period, so it may be 2 weeks from the time that you sprayed the weeds before you can see.
Okay, because I spread out some of the 2,4-D about a week ago, but the lawn care people say they're not going to aerate until there's some rain in the forecast.
Right, right.
So I think I've got plenty of time.
Probably.
Yeah.
right. You do aerating the lawn is something that you want to do after there's some moisture in the soil, because otherwise the little pegs won't go into the ground. So since it hasn't rained here for several weeks, you're probably a little behind the curve for aeration. And if you spray out weeds, again, read the label, because you might not be able to overseed until the time has elapsed. And the label will tell you how long you have to wait. Okay.
Thank you.
Shrubs and trees. Pruning, don't. There's nothing you can prune now. Now we do, I will say, we generally do a late fall pruning on our boxwood hedges. We're taking a chance because we could have some freeze damage, but it also doesn't regrow really well after that. But you're taking a chance if you do that. So don't prune anything unless it's to remove dead or broken branches, or that branch that slaps you in the face every time you walk by that shrub or tree. Do plant. This is the best time to install new trees and shrubs, just like perennials. Cooler air temperatures mean less stress on the plant. There's still plenty of time to establish new roots before next spring. Dig your planting holes no deeper than, but at least twice as wide as the plant's root ball, and that goes for any of these plants, even if it's a balled and burlap plant or one in a pot. Break up any clumpy backfill and only mix in enough compost or leaf mold to ensure good soil to root contact. And that probably it depends which school you're in, but the general thought is that the roots of the plant are going to have to grow into the native soil. So if you put them in a mix, a pure compost mix, it might just only grow into that, and then sort of hit a wall there and not be able to grow out any further. So if you mix in some compost, so it still makes good root contact, then it will gradually grow into the native soil. And of course, if your soil test says you need lime, this is a perfect time to mix it in with the backfill, and water well after they're planted. Don't fertilize. It's not the time of year to be fertilizing trees and shrubs, because like pruning, nitrogen fertilizer stimulates top growth. So unless your soil test calls for additional phosphorus or potassium, again, these are things that you can put in with your backfill. Save the fertilizer for spring. So if you get a soil test that says you need phosphorus or potassium, you might want to mix in a little 10, 20, 20, which has a low first number, which is nitrogen. We didn't really talk about what I'm talking about, nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. But on any fertilizer you have, there will be 3 numbers on it. Somewhere on the bag, it has to be there. Sometimes it's in small print on the back. The first number is nitrogen. So that is the number that we want to have very low this time of year for any kind of fertilization. The second number is phosphorus. Our native soils here are generally low in phosphorus, but a soil test will tell you because that's not always the case. And the third number is potassium. Those are the 3 major nutrients that plants need to grow. So, and also the pH, if your pH is too low or too high, that inhibits the plant's ability to take up these nutrients. So the cheapest thing you can do to improve your garden is to get your pH correct. So your soil test will tell you if your pH is too low, and it will make a recommendation for addition of lime in that case. Generally, our pH is low here, so it will be, I mean, that's just our native soil has a tendency to be that. So get the soil test. It's free.
So when do you prune trees, like a tulip tree or?
Well, there's two things you can do. You can prune them at the end of winter, which is very stimulating, so they will put on a whole lot of new growth then, or you can wait till the middle of summer and prune then, and that was less invigorating to them. So and say in June is generally a good time. Now, another thing to keep in mind is in the spring pruning, don't prune plants that bloom in the spring. For example, forsythia, azaleas, rhododendrons, your hydrangeas with the mop head hydrangeas, the big blue or pink or purple flowers, those all bloom on wood that grew before. The buds are already formed on your azaleas now. So don't prune those plants until after they've bloomed in the spring. Don't prune any of them now. Okay? Any other questions on that subject? Next. Okay, and there's a proper planting of a tree. See how the root ball is even with or a little bit above the soil surface, and the hole is at least twice as wide as the root ball on that dogwood tree. And you can tell it's fall because there's berries on the dogwood. So that's Mark. And he's got his backfill on a tarp to the side there. So he's already mixed that all together and it's ready to go back in. Hardy tropicals. Okay, this is a whole different bunch of plants. These are plants that you're kind of taking a chance with to begin with. Marginally hardy in zone 7 require a bit of protection for winter. So the USDA has a zone hardiness map. We are in zone 7B. They've divided it up further, but we are zone 7, 7B. And that means that the plants that will grow in that area will not probably, if you want it to be in the range of zone 7 to 9 or 7 to 8, whatever, 6 to 9, whatever. The smaller the number, the colder the weather. And ours is, I believe, our coldest is supposed to be 10 degrees. That's our bottom. And you know we've gotten colder than that, so sometimes you have to be careful. After first frost, mulch. Now, somebody asked me yesterday, why after first frost? Mostly because then you know that the plant is done growing. So one thing we don't want to do with these marginally hardy plants is add a lot of moisture to the soil in the winter. So after first frost, the tops have died down, and you can use the tops as mulch I would not, you can cut them back if you want, but they will need quite a bit of mulch. Cold is the enemy. Temperatures dipping below 10 degrees, but cold, wet feet are the killers. So these plants, like your bananas and your alocasias or other elephant ears, what?
The angel trumpets.
Yes, angel trumpets, ginger lilies, those kind of plants. They need a little drainage in the winter. They don't like to have their feet cold and wet. So the plants you're really concerned about, you build a cage around the most tender and add a deep but loose layer of leaves. So that would be, I'll have a picture in a second. Be patient in spring. Some of these plants are not going to come out of the ground until May. So don't give up. Don't think your plants are done just because you didn't see them in March when everything else is coming up. And this is what we did a couple years ago. And we put cages around plants and then loaded them up with leaves from the garden. And that added a nice insulation for them. This plant died.
What plant was that?
That was the sago palm. Oh well, shopping opportunity. But garden's an experiment. I mean, it's always something, you're always trying something new, and you're always, and frankly, if it was the same every year, it wouldn't be fun, right? Okay, annuals. Plant pansies, ornamental kales, snapdragons, and other cool weather lovers. And I want to remind you that this week, our plant sale was last week, but this week ACC is having their plant sale, and I have it from yesterday's speaker that they have pansies and ornamental kale and other cool weather lovers. So if you need to go shopping, they also have mums, which is another good thing to plant now.
Good prices.
And good prices. So, and speaking of plants, the 4-H is having their plant sale. All the bases are covered because the 4-H's plant sale has all the fruits. They've got peaches and do they have pears this year?
Yes.
Apples, pecans, dates. No, not dates. Figs. Figs. Yes, figs and blackberries, muscadines. So they've got all your fruit trees covered. Anyway, those it's online, and there's also some brochures over here on the table. Okay, so here's something you can do before frost, because frost will kill them. Take 4-inch cuttings of your favorite summer annuals like coleus and geraniums. Take the flowers off and all but the topmost leaves. Dip the stem ends in a rooting hormone and plant in moist sand, vermiculite, or your favorite sterile medium. Provide bright light and consistent moisture over winter. But you have to bring them inside because they will die in the freeze. So I'm thinking about doing that. We have some seedling coleus here, and I'm thinking we might want to save some of those for next year. So that's a good one to do. Mm-hmm.
How about those sweet potato, the ornamental sweet potato?
Uh-huh.
Is there anything you can do to keep those over the winter? Can you pull those potatoes out and do anything with them?
Well, you can definitely take cuttings of the vines and root them like this, and save those until next spring. I'm not sure about the sweet potatoes themselves. Do you see how big those are?
Yeah, I took some and put the root part in water and the toothpicks in there and set them up, hoping they would shoot out some.
Did they?
I just did it.
Oh, okay.
I wanna watch them this winter and see if they'll.
You can try that, but I would also take some cuttings of the vines and root those. So this is taking, I think this is what is that, perilla or something? This is what you do basically. Dip it in a little bit of, I would probably do it more like this than in 1 cup, but that'll work too. A little rooting hormone. Actually, coleus are so easy, you probably don't even need the rooting hormone. You can do it in,
Just do it in water. Just put it in water over the winter.
you keep them in water over the winter?
Yeah, just put them in. Yeah, no cuttings. I just sort of keep them rooted in water all winter.
Well, okay, there's a tip. Just keep your coleus cuttings in water all winter. So that'll, and they'll make roots, and then you can plant them out in the spring.
You can just stick them in the dirt and they'll come out without, I'll do that in the summer when they get leggy, I just
Yeah.
cut them off and make new plants.
Right, but this is over winter, so you can't leave them out.
But yeah, like inside, I think it would
Yeah.
be the same thing.
Oh, it works for herbs. You can root your herbs too, and I think these are scented geraniums here. So this is another way of doing it, all in one big tray like that. You are going to want to make sure that whatever you planted in has drainage, so it's not sitting in mud. But I guess if you do it in a glass of water, that's not an issue. I don't know all the science behind that.
I don't know, but my mom used to do that. I mean, it's an old method of rooting things.
Yeah, in water. Some things work, some things don't work that way. What is the variegated Joe Pye weed? It didn't work for that, did it? Doesn't work for that. Doesn't work for everything. Okay, water features. If you've got a fountain or a little in-ground pond, you want to cover with lightweight netting, like bird netting, to exclude leaves. That's an easy way rather than try to get all the leaves out in the spring. If you have a water-filled container, you might want to put a tennis ball in it or other rubber ball, and that will shrink when it freezes rather than crack the container. And when the water freezes, if you've got fish, now this is not necessary if you don't have fish in your pond, but you might want to open an area by putting a pot of hot water on the ice. Don't bang on the ice. It's very upsetting to the fish. So keep that in mind. Equipment. This is the things you should be doing, which nobody ever does. Well, this one, you definitely do this one. Bring in your decorative ceramic and terracotta pots, because those expensive pots have pores in them that collect water, and when that freezing will make them spall and crack, and pretty soon you won't have a pot in the garden. So bring those in out of harm's way. Clean and protect your tools. Take your digging tools. I have to keep a bucket of, I almost brought a bucket of oily sand here, but it sounded messy and heavy, so I didn't. But anyway, you want a bucket of sand that you have put motor oil into, and then just plunge the blade of your shovels and other cutting tools into that, or digging tools, and that will clean them, and it will also protect them with a layer of a coating of oil. Yes?
I use WD-40 on all my phones when I fish, really like that, and it keeps them really nice.
Oh, that's one of the recommendations, and that is once the tools are clean, spraying them with a layer of WD-40 or other lightweight oil is a good way to keep them that way over winter when you're not using them.
Them in the bucket of oily sand, just put them in and take them out.
It gets the dirt
Leave
off.
them there.
No, just in and out. To take, plunging in the bucket, you'll plunge them in and out to scrape off any loose material, and then it will also leave a coating, but then you take it out of the bucket rather than leaving it in the bucket.
And can it be used motor oil?
Oh, yes.
Okay.
I would definitely use used motor oil. Okay, disconnect and drain your hoses. Bring them in, bring all your nozzles in and all your sprinklers inside out of the weather, because the freezing of the water in there can actually damage the hoses and the nozzles and so forth. So this is important. And if you leave the hose connected, especially if there's a fixture on the end, you can have to have a plumber come in and fix your pipes. Cover your spigots. If there's a risk of that, you want to cover your spigots. They actually make special covers for spigots, so that would be a good thing to have. Winterize your mower. Here's something that we never do. Check belts, filters, and safety shields. Drain old oil and refill with new, and you want to do this while the engine is warm, and that way you can get rid of any contaminants that are still circulating rather than let them settle. Empty the gas tank and run the engine until it stalls, and that makes sure all the gas is gone from all the hoses and other things. Lightly oil pivot and wear points to prevent rust, and clean or replace the air filter. Okay. Any questions? No? You all have your chore list of what you're going to do? Wait a minute. Don't worry. Spring will soon be here again.